everyone. This is Rita Matuzik, and you are listening to the Real Talk, Real Results podcast, the show that doesn't sugarcoat B2B marketers' everyday challenges and discusses actionable, realistic solutions. Today, we're discussing how to operationalize to scale your organization and where marketing fits into that. Joining me is Annette Reed, Senior Director of Global Strategic Campaigns and Demand Generation at SentinelOne. Annette, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rita, for having me. I'm excited to share a little bit of my background, hopefully help people with what challenges they're dealing with. So I have been with SentinelOne only for a few months since November, but have been in my marketing journey for almost 2 decades now. It feels weird to say that, but and it's been really great. I loved working in marketing. I actually started out in product marketing and then went into the brand side, the corporate marketing side. I've worked in channel, retail even. And what has really been beneficial for me is having all of those experiences in those different teams has helped me have empathy for what they're doing, the stakeholders that they're working with. And so to me, it's really helped me have a rounded out ability to create demand programs that takes all those different aspects, different disciplines, and working with those teams to create demand programs that our customers are going to really enjoy, but has the partnerships internally that really are effective for us.
Yes, absolutely. I love that because you have so much varied experience that also relies on each other. And so I find that makes you a better marketer because you're understanding of all of the different functions in a deeper way because you've done it, which leads me to our first question here today. How do you think the marketing organization as a whole plays a role in scaling the business?
Oh, thank you for this question. Honestly, I think marketing has a huge role in scale. Let's take a picture at just how organizations scale. When you think about a sales organization and how they scale, it honestly is a lot of times a one-to-one thing. If you want more customers, you're going to have to get more salespeople, right? Because a salesperson can only build so many relationships at a time. Now, there's ways that they can be more effective with how they are communicating. There's tools that they can use. There's assistants they can have that are doing the scheduling for them. So there is some scalability they can have. But if you need to have 15,000 accounts, you're going to have 1,500 salespeople. So it's a very similar, almost one-to-one relationship, whereas marketing has the ability to really scale exponentially in what we do, but with less resources and especially less headcount, because there's so many more opportunities for us to use different tools, agencies, things of that nature that are going to help us scale where other parts of the organization don't have that same functionality. They might pull out a few efficiencies, but they're really not going to be able to scale as well as a marketing team does. So I feel like marketing is a huge area where the business can resource differently in your marketing organizations than you can in other areas of your business.
That is so interesting. So what do you think needs to be in place foundationally for the organization to be able to scale as the organization, but also as the marketing team?
So as marketers, we're constantly being told we're having to have budget cuts. We can't get that new headcount that we want. So for us to be able to scale, we really have to have a good foundation of tools, systems, processes that are going to help us to be able to be responding agile to new market changes. I work in cybersecurity now, and it's amazing the number of things that happen so quickly in the security industry, right? There's breaches every day, and you have to be able to quickly respond to things that are happening in the market. We used to, in another company, I always say, we're not curing cancer, so don't stress too much. But really, in security, you are protecting so much of the things that are happening in everybody's business. So it really does have a sense of urgency that are not in other areas. So for us to be effective, we have to have the right systems and tools at the foundation to really be able to, that's why I say operationalize to scale. Because if you don't have those foundational pieces set up, then everything you do is very manual. Let me give you an example of, you can use tools like Asana, Monday, any of those kind of project management tools. They can be set up so that you can collaborate across your entire marketing organization, across sales, And you can set those up with rules, parameters, you can have project templates, all those things that when you say, hey, I need an email today, you can trigger that off. You can have one person immediately going and creating your email copy. You can have another person building it in Marketo, getting the framework, another person talking to get the audience identified. All of those things can be happening simultaneously if you have a system that is set up to do that. And then you just have one person that's kind of pulling all those strings and making sure everything gets done. So really, you have to get those operational pieces established. Otherwise, you're going to be unable to scale. And then it's a manual thing. It's one person going out and saying, I'm going to write that email. I'm going to build it in Marketo. I'm going to have the executive team review my plan. All of those pieces, you can't spread it out. You can't work with other people. And if you are a team of 1, 5, 20, but you're going to be a team of 20, 100 down the road, you have to have those foundational pieces ready. Otherwise, every new person doesn't scale to the next level. They're just one incremental person. Whereas if you can get that foundational piece, that new person that you add feels like 5 people instead of just one.
Yes, that's fascinating. So as you were talking through like what the foundational pieces are, I was hearing that it sounds like communication and not only tools plays a huge role in everything. What do you find are some of the biggest hurdles cross-functional teams are facing in communicating properly?
What I have found is when it comes to communicating, I mentioned in my history, I've worked in a bunch of different functions within marketing. And what that has helped me understand the other person sitting across from me, right? That's the old saying of walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. If you're walking into a meeting and you're trying to get a group of people to agree to your plan, and your plan goes against their fundamental roles and responsibilities, and you're asking them to do something for you, they're not going to walk out the door and say yes. They're not going to be part of that piece. So you have to be able to understand their stakeholders. You have to understand what their day-to-day work looks like and what you're asking, how it could fit into that request. So I think fundamentally one of the biggest challenges that blocks effective communication when you're in an organization cross-functionally working is not understanding the person sitting across from you, their role, their stakeholders, their pain points, their KPIs. What is making them successful? I think that often means that you're coming in from a very different perspective. And that can happen when you first start a new job. You're learning their tools, but you're also learning how they do things, because you're coming in from, this is how I used to do it at my previous company, and you're just assuming everybody does it that way because that made sense to you,
Right.
right? So I think that's a fundamental part of a good communication, but especially across cross-functional teams.
That I feel like you nailed it. I totally see that all the time where I might feel very passionately about something because it's my OKR or I have a KPI set against this. And I'm going to somebody who I know can support me with this big project, but they have 1,000 other things on their plate that may or may not align to their set OKRs and KPIs. And then I'm coming in and asking them to care about my work when they've got a whole bunch of other fire drills. So 100% figuring out how to like bridge that gap of everybody's unique and individual OKRs and where we overlap with our skill sets and our projects and helping each other get things accomplished, and understanding internally like who are all of our resources on the team, tools, things like that is so key. You mentioned some tools already like Asana and Monday. What is the way that we can better standardize communication and tools and documents across teams to improve efficiency and visibility and communication?
As you mentioned, documentation, all those things. Honestly, when you think about it, whatever tool works for you is the best tool. Somebody once, I took a photography class. This is a little side note. I took a photography class years ago, and they basically said, someone asked like, what kind of camera is best? And they're like, whatever you're going to use. If you want to have the big elaborate SDL like camera and it's got the crazy lenses, but because it's so big and heavy and it's cumbersome, if you don't take it, then that's not a great camera. It could be the top of the line camera, but if you have your phone on you every day and you like that camera and you're going to use it, that's the best camera for you. So I kind of take that same approach with tools. Whatever tools you have that you can make effective and you will use, that's the most important tool. I've come into several organizations and I've just determined this is kind of a favorite, a sweet spot for me, is to come into organizations that are trying to get to that scale point and they're missing some of those foundational pieces. I don't come in with saying, hey, these are all the tools I need you to purchase. I say, what do you have and how can we work with those? Because you probably already have a culture in that organization to use those tools. And trying to change somebody is a lot harder. We can do it and we can talk about that too. But honestly, if you can work within the tools you have and still accomplish the massive goals that you have, do it. Use a spreadsheet to build something you need. But one of the biggest thing is don't rely on just telling the person, hey, if you need something from me, reach out. That's never going to work because something's going to come up. They're going to get busy. They're not going to be thinking about it. It's better if you set up regular ways that you are communicating. If you need someone to give you a report every Friday, send them a meeting invite so they have time on their calendar that there's a reminder that they're sending you that report. Set up a weekly meeting with somebody to say, hey, what are the key things that we need to talk about on, put it in the agenda of the meeting. If you use Asana, one of the things I use for Asana, I literally have all of my one-on-ones and all of my team meetings. I have a project in Asana and I put for every meeting, I put a task, and anytime during the week where I'm like, oh, I need to talk to my team about this, I put it on the agenda. So when we walk into that meeting, I don't have to build a whole new agenda. I go in and say, oh, here's the things that we needed to talk about this week based on. So you set up these systems so that you can help remember the communication things. Another thing I love to do is if you have those 5 different people that you want to have review every time you send out an email, every time you're doing, whatever it is, set it up in your Asana task or your Monday task that these people have to review and approve it. If you don't use a system like that, you can even put it at the top of a Google Doc, right? And you can have check boxes that say, hey, Steve reviewed this, Joe reviewed this one, Rita reviewed this one, and they have check boxes. You can set these things up so don't rely on you just remembering. Set up the system so that you force someone to acknowledge that information. And then you have a record too. You have the CYA right there too. So
You touched a little bit on change management. How do you manage change management for teams who are probably maybe moving out of like early stage startup stage, getting into more mid stage or maybe mid to late stage, or those folks who are maybe in the process of becoming acquired or going public? Like there's a totally different flow of work and culture that is in all of those different stages of companies. And how do you help, those folks who've already been on the team transition to that next level?
He says you have to build the systems and processes for the way you want it to work, not for the bad behavior, the bad players, right? So a lot of times when we're thinking as marketers, we're talking about attribution all the time. How do we get credit for stuff? And, I'm working with my campaign managers and they're always giving examples of like, oh, well, the salesperson, because they knew they were going to this event and this account was going to be there, they opened the opportunity prior to the event so that they got credit for it versus us because they put it open on the date, or they have this opportunity that's open for 6 months, but we've been doing all this work. So attribution, obviously it's a hot topic for all marketers. And one of the things I liked about it is like, don't build the process for the bad behavior. You build the process the way it should be running, the way you want it. And then you can build in all those checkpoints to help refine that bad behavior. And you have to kind of weed that out a little bit over time. But change management is not easy. I think one of the things I always think about is trying to, instead of rip and replace, like just with a tool, try to find things that are currently working and just adding or adjusting from that. So if they have a tool that they're already using, don't change everything in the tool. Start to layer in some new things so it's a softer landing place for that adjustment. I don't know what your experience is with that, but I feel like that's one of the best ways to avoid, big headaches. It's like, just do small changes to get you where you need to be. And then I would say the biggest thing is communicate, enable, and do it regularly and often. Just because you rolled it out doesn't mean that everybody's going to be using it 6 months down the road, even a month. You have to constantly communicate, and build the systems that are going to support using that. So if you have a new reporting system, build that weekly check-in to say, hey, do we have all these points in the system? You have a new budget tool. Make sure everybody has on their calendar a calendar invite for every Friday to go into the budget tool to make sure that they've put any new POs in there, they've closed any old POs. Don't rely on someone just remembering that that's part of their job.
I think you hit the nail on the head with talking about consistency and repetition. It's so important because when we make a process update or we introduce a new document or new iterations to an existing process, as the person or the team who developed this, we're really excited about it. We know the ins and outs of everything. And I think sometimes I've done this myself. I've seen my team do this. I've seen other people do this. We make the assumption that everyone else gets it. We had a meeting, we talked through it, we shared the documents. Everyone should understand. That's not human nature most of the time. So I think it's important for us to continue reminding people this is our process and to be comfortable with the fact that it can be uncomfortable reminding certain team members because maybe they're in senior positions or maybe you've had tension with them because of existing processes or lack of process. And so implementing these new things can be a little bit challenging. There can be some friction and you're going to be uncomfortable. And I think that's normal.
I think when you implement any sort of process or new system, flexibility, right? When you build the system, can you be flexible enough to only incrementally change certain things? Fundamentally, you want it to be the right system. You don't want to build a broken system just because the previous thing was completely broken, right? But can you make adjustments there? But then once you've activated on it, once you've launched it, are we looking back to say, hey, how's this working? Because you can then identify, sometimes it's hard at the beginning to fully identify all the pain points of the users because they may not realize that they're doing something in a certain way until you shift that. And then once you've shifted that, then you can see, oh, here's the problem we're having. They were doing it this way, and here's why. I didn't understand that. Now I can see why we need to do it slightly different. And is the process willing to be flexible that way? I think that's really critical part of it too. And you hit it. I loved that you talked about that uncomfortable because it can be uncomfortable for the receiver and the developer because you're like, I did this whole thing and now I have to go back and change it. That flexibility really helps us to build systems that will work for the long term.
Yes. And I think you touched upon this a little bit. It's very important as the developer of the process to be open to feedback. Maybe you have, like a forum or something where you're like, hey, do you like this process? Or, on your intake form, it says, give me feedback. How is this working? Because we don't always see like the end user experience of something, even like a process change or documentation and what's missing. I think just having that openness and that flexibility, like you said, to understanding these are living, breathing, changing documents and processes that are going to evolve over time. And what was working before, what we're trying to improve upon now, and where we're going in the future is going to be ever changing.
And it's a good to remind people of why you're doing a process change anyway. A lot of times I've heard people say, I don't want to be beholden to a process that's going to slow things down, that are going to muck up the system, right? And I'm like, there is a reason that we developed this. We're going through one of those changes right now where we have a tool that so many people are in, but we don't have a formal process and there's not a lot of gates to control it. And we're seeing things like people are making changes and they thought they did it the right way, but then a link is suddenly broken and a digital ad is pointing to a broken link and you're losing dollars. Right. So you have to control certain things. And when people realize that and they're like, oh, I see why you're implementing some of these things, don't make your processes and your procedures so complicated because that's the operational that doesn't scale. That is not a scalable thing. But as your organization gets more headcount, as you get, you go from those 5 to 10 marketers, 10 to 20, it's harder to manage every individual person. So those systems have to be a way to have, a checkpoint for you, but not in the purpose of slowing down the work. It's to maintain the quality of work. And yes, that might slow it down a little bit, but if you've built it in the right way, you're only slowing it down a little bit. And if you want quality, you do have to pause a little bit. So when you build those systems to scale, you have to scale in the right way because you've got both sides scaling. You want to be able to be more effective with your people that you currently have. Well, as you add more people to that system, as I get more marketers, I have to have the system that's going to make them be more, agile and more effective and be able to do more with what they already have.
So I want to come back to something you said earlier in the discussion about marketers being asked to work with limited resources, budgets, all of that. So most of us in the B2B space, right, we're being asked to do more with less. Fewer people on our teams, less budget, overall the resources we have to accomplish sustained and continued business growth are a bit diminished from previous years. How do we create a foundation for growth with this tightening of budget and resources?
I am trying to find the solution to this right now. So I welcome other people's opinions on this. Um, but what I have found as I've been kind of faced with, hey, we're not getting new headcount and we are being asked to do more. Budgets are flat, but again, our targets are higher. Honestly, one of the things that I'm taking a look at is one, I think the easy answer is efficiencies, right? You can renegotiate contracts with certain vendors that you're working with to see if they can cut back on costs, saying, hey, we have a great relationship. We've worked with you consistently. Can we get a new discount? Also looking at data, look at any program that you're running, your direct mail programs, your content syndication programs, webinar program. How can you get more efficiency in there? All programs should be doing that generally. Your emails, you should be constantly looking at, hey, are we A/B testing our email subject lines? And have we figured out the right days to send? So data is going to be huge to help get those efficiencies. But one of the things I would say that I'm almost like brand new thinking about is your team structure and what you are working on. We are experiencing huge challenges with, hey, this is a number of headcount that we have. We're not going to get new headcount, but we are needing more diligence in a certain area. You do have to look at the resources you have, and I'm going to talk about people resources. Has the team you either have built or you have inherited been set up in the way that you need to do the business? So one thing you can think about is like, if I'm playing with this headcount and I'm just playing the game of chess, are these people in the right positions? One, for their skill set, are they being effective there? Or two, the needs of the business. Is there an area where I need that headcount here and somebody I already have could grow into that position or already has the skills that could move easily into that area? Because a lot of times what we've done is we've built things based on previous ways of working. As our businesses are changing, as we're trying to go from, $1 million business to a $1 billion business, there are different needs. New leaders come in with different ideas. So you have to take a look at, are we being effective with the resources we have? And people resources is one where I think we often think that we are stuck in, they are just this. They are just the campaign manager. They are just the webinar person. But can we either move those people into the positions we need for the business to grow? What I'm talking about is saying, hey, I have 5 people on my team. Are they all in the right positions? Is this what I really need them to be doing? Could they move over here and do this that's going to help these 4 people over here do their jobs better, and this person's role kind of moves under here? Thinking through those things, because if you haven't set up your team to be effective, you're not going to be able to scale in the future either, right? So, and you're also not giving these people the tools they need to be effective. We're making it harder for them to do their jobs. So, team structure and team roles is a huge part of making sure that one, people are effective, the business can grow, but ultimately, I think it can really help them feel like they're doing their job better. It's sometimes being that hard shift, but I think in the long run, it can really help people be more successful in their roles. So that's a new thought that I've had recently to challenges with resources. Yes, squeeze every inch out of the individual budget you have. Um, Look at how you can optimize and improve your programs, but also how are you optimizing and improving your team as well?
I want to click into that a little bit more. I think oftentimes, we come into an organization and we're there for, it's our first year, or we've been there for a long time. And we were hired to do, one role, but the business has evolved, or the roles have evolved. Like there's so many new tools, generative AI is a thing, like everybody's all worried, oh, my job's going to go away. But I view those things as jobs are going to evolve. There's going to be new
Yeah.
jobs. You as a marketer, particular like digital marketers, demand gen marketers, campaign marketers, everybody is going to have to learn new skills because there's new tools in the market and there's new asks of us. So I actually view what you were saying as an opportunity for like making myself a better marketer and also making me more marketable for future prospects. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about kind of the evolution of teams and roles. So over the years, demand gen has evolved to including digital marketing, marketing operations. Some organizations call this type of a team structure the demand center. Some just call it digital demand. But I want to dig into something that I think really flies under the radar a lot of times, and that's how does the marketing ops team set the foundation for campaigns and demand gen and digital marketing?
I love this question. So, in my previous organization, I joined the organization to run their campaigns, and very quickly, I was seeing some challenges, and I went to leadership, and I was like, "Hey, this structure isn't necessarily working for me. I'm not sure where I fit," and they actually ended up moving me and expanding my role into actually the marketing operations team, and I took on with that demand center team. So like you said, I had never heard of it. I had always heard about it as a programs team, and then they calling it
Right.
demand center. So yeah, the definitions are different everywhere, but they moved me under the marketing operations team. And one of the things it felt so weird to be like the demand team and the campaigns team is sitting under operations. I have to say it was one of my favorite organizational structures, not just because I loved my boss. Huge shout out to Justin, was like my favorite guy to work with. But also marketing demand campaigns work so closely with an operations team. Every time you're wanting to send an email, you need to have that operations team work with you. Every time you're setting up a campaign in Salesforce, all that operations is right there. If
Right.
you're wanting to be innovative and you're like, I'm going to do this multi-day or a series of webinars that are like bite-sized things, and I want people to register for 3 at a time instead of just 1. Anytime you want to be innovative, you need to work with your marketing operations team to make sure it's set up correctly. So having that close alignment and working so closely because of our team structure, I have never had a closer, better relationship with the marketing operations team than I had by sitting on that structure. So I think it really improved communication, obviously empathy. We worked so closely, we had some of the same pain points. Um, so I thought it was really beneficial, and our campaigns and demand center team were more effective because of that relationship. So whether you have that structural relationship or not, marketers should be best friends with their operations people. Like,
Yes.
buy them a coffee, buy them a drink, make sure you have one-on-ones with them, make sure you're regularly finding out what they're doing, how they can help you, get them to help test things for you. Sit down to say, let's have a brainstorming session. I want to try something new. How would that work from a setup? How would we do that? So
Yes. So I'm 100% in agreement with you. I've never like reported into a marketing ops team, but I've always been like cross-functional partners and like sat on the same team with like the same leader. And I can't do my role. So I do digital and demand. I can't do anything without the marketing ops team. Like they do the integrations for all the marketing tools that I'm using. Like, I can't run drift programs without them running integrations through Marketo, Salesforce, the website, everywhere to make sure that everything is set up properly on the front end and the back end. They're my partners in everything. And I think what I was asking the question why I said it flies under the radar is because, being on the team that like perhaps presents to sales and is like, hey, look at all these wonderful digital and demand channels that are generating revenue for you, right? Oftentimes the sales organization, they very clearly understand like the field marketing piece, even webinars, like that makes sense to them because it's tangible. But you get into like, what is a web chat bot? What are Google ads? What are Bing ads? All the different ad platforms. None of those campaigns can run without marketing ops. And so I find that, making it clear to others on the organization, in leadership, cross-functionally, your sales partners, that this team is critical to our success is really important because they're like really behind the scenes. And giving that team opportunities to be visible and to have some of the spotlight because our success is fully on their back.
They're like the secret sauce of marketing, right? Even if you want to be really creative with something, you got to work with your marketing operations team or it might completely fall apart. You want to set up some new meeting scheduler system and you're like, I've got this cool tool, but they're like, well, we got to integrate it and all that. It's so important. So there's huge secret sauce and they don't get enough credit.
Well, and I wanted to come back to like the marketing attribution discussion. You cannot build dashboards. You cannot show data without your marketing ops team. They're the ones who are going to integrate your tools like Demandbase or 6sense or whatever other tools that pull in just data from all of these sources to show you these beautiful dashboards. So they're such a critical, pivotal team to, I think, the success of the entire marketing organization, but definitely on the campaigns, demand gen, digital side, we can't do anything without our marketing ops friends who we both clearly love so much. And I have one final question for us today. I'd love to hear your perspective on selecting the right tools, systems, vendors for running digital and demand.
Oh gosh, this is a constant one for us. Honestly, my thing would be test. Always take a testing mindset, whether you have a vendor you've worked with for a long time or you're evaluating something new. If you can find a way to work with them in a testing fashion, I know platforms is the hardest one. Like with 6sense, Demandbase, you're like, which one do I use? How do I know? Those are harder. You can't necessarily test. So with those platform ones, talk to people. And I would even say, I know that those companies are going to give you referrals. Well, those referrals, it's just like a job interview, right? I'm not going to give a referral to my future manager that's not going to say good things about me, right? So find people, connect on LinkedIn, find people you've used to work with that are now at new organizations, see what tools they're using. With those big platform things, go out and find people who are using. But if you're working with a vendor, test. If it's a new vendor, say, hey, we're still trying to decide if we want to do this, if it's going to have a good return for us. Can we do a 1 quarter quick, hit one with you? Even big vendors, Tech Targets, the Infuse Media, NetHawk, all those different vendors, they have a ton of different options for how they build things. They can definitely do tests for you. And you can usually negotiate good pricing, saying like, hey, we're going to try this out. If it's working for us, we're going to continue. So test. And if you've already done something with them and it's not being effective, if you feel like there's value there, try a different angle before you throw it out. That's always like, don't just turn off a digital ad. With my digital team, I always talk about there's so many elements to the journey that the customer journey, that you don't want to just throw it out because it's not effective. Look at your creative, look at your copy, look at your landing page. At any point you don't think those are working, you optimize, you change the landing page so that it reflects the CTA that you had in the ad. You change the creative. Once you feel like you've exhausted something, throw it out, get rid of it. But if you feel like there's value, if you're just kind of like, I don't know, it should have worked, why didn't it work? Then test and optimize for it. But if you're like, I was already on the fence and I tried everything, But testing, I feel like, and also this is my other little tip. If you're struggling with internal teams getting their buy-in for something and they really want to do one thing and you want to do another, testing solves all of their problems too. You can say, "Oh, why don't we just test both ideas?" And then you get buy-in where you had a wall put up before and now you're like, "Oh yeah, okay, sure, let's try it all. Let's try both of those."
I just did that literally yesterday. I got a recommendation for CTA language on the website, and I was like, I don't hate it. We can A/B test it. There's free tools out there to A/B test. So here's the one that I loved, and here's the one somebody else who's very much more senior than me loved, and let's see which one performs better. I'm not emotionally tied to it. Let's use the
Yep.
data. I think that's important.
And just to kind of round this all out, to do testing effectively, you have to have your systems and processes set up so that you can do it, because otherwise it's really hard to test. So all of these ideas, they're not going to work if you haven't set your foundation. So really, if you want to scale, do focus on the operational side. Otherwise, you're going to not be effective. You're not going to be able to test. You're not going to be able to run these things that you want to do.
Yes, that is very true. Annette, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate your time and for joining our podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.